Welcome to another episode of Dad Can We Talk? I am your host, Anthony Ray, and today is a bonus episode of Dad Can We Talk? Um, this is my first woman guest, and I know I talk all the time about this is by dads for dads, but this guest, she intrigued me. She has an organization that focuses on dads and daughters. So I was like, let's see what this is about. Let's go ahead and have this conversation. I think she has some good stuff. I've looked a little into her organization, and we're gonna have this conversation. So first thing first, I need everyone, all of my supporters, to go and subscribe to the YouTube page at Dad Can We Talk. Like the Facebook page and Instagram at Dad Can We Talk. If you desire to listen to any of the other episodes, any of the other 80, you can go to www.dadcanwetalk.com, and all of the web episodes are streaming on the website, or you can check it out on Spotify, and you can go to Apple Podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, go subscribe. That helps the podcast out a lot. And one more thing, I'm getting some more shirts in. I'm taking pre-orders right now. So if anyone would like a shirt, I'm trying to have them by June before our next community event. So get your pre-orders in, let me know your sizes, and they are $30 each. And if you want them, please get with me, because I will be putting that order in really soon. So without further ado, I am here with Mrs. Jaime Hansen. Hopefully I'm saying the name right.
You are. It's
Yep.
perfect.
And she is way out in Los Angeles, California. So she is on the other side of the country. I'm out here in good old Florida. So she is the founder of Alley Oop, and I want her to introduce herself.
Great, Anthony. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so honored to be your first female guest. That is really exciting, in 80 episodes, no less. So that's kind of impressive for both of us. I'm happy about it. Yes, so I'm Jaime Hansen. I am the founder of a company called Alley Oop, and like you said, we are here to champion the relationship between dads and daughters, and really leverage that connection to empower the girls, to really like fuel their confidence, their resilience, their voices, their influence. That relationship is very unique and special, and so we're really completely devoted to that.
I believe that. I have two daughters. So I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. And
fun ages.
Yeah, those are the two greatest challenges of my life right now. I also have a son who's 6, but my son, he's all right. You know, he has his ways also, but I feel like I understand my son more, because for one, he's my middle child, and I was a middle child. So I think me and him have so much in common. There's so many things that I just understand about him. When it comes to these girls, I'm just like, man, sometimes I do not understand.
It's so funny that you say that, though, because obviously I'm obsessed with gender dynamics, and I think it's just a completely fascinating subject, the way that men and women and girls and boys are just different. But I also have 3 kids, and I swear that I think, even with all of that, with my experience, I think birth order is a far more telling characteristic in their personalities than gender. So I think it's so interesting that you're like, yeah, I relate to my son, but really because he's a middle child, it's so true, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I want you to go, let's start. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna start it just how I always start the podcast. I want to go here. I want for you to talk about what your relationship was like with your dad.
Yes, well, I was prepared for this one because I know you always started. So my dad is great. My relationship with him growing up was great. My relationship with him now is great. Our family, we had 2 daughters. So I'm the oldest of 2 girls. And my dad, I think he's, I don't want to say different. I think he's like a little atypical than a traditional man of that generation was, right? So he kind of like wasn't into sports and wasn't into like quote unquote like stereotypical guy things, right? So that kind of gave him a lens of which just like, okay, like zero expectations for us, right? It was actually my mom that was really into sports. And both my sister and I were very into sports. And my dad was like, all right, let's see what this is all about, you know? So it was different, but it was good. And he was a child psychologist by training. So he was like, I think made to be a dad, honestly, right? Like he was just very prepared for it. And then he left psychology and, became more of a businessman just to support his family. And, it was more lucrative and whatnot. But, I think he was always very patient and understanding. And definitely, I think my sister and I were foreign to him still, but he was willing to play. Like he was just like, all right, I'm in, like I'll learn as I go. And that was our childhood. And now as adults, I think that's still the case. I think he has an abundance of patience, which my husband always applauds him for. And yeah, so we have a really good relationship. It's good. I'm very lucky.
That's good. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. And I love to hear those stories. I just love to hear stories about
Yeah.
dads that are there and that are active. And it's just always a good thing because I don't think they get talked about enough.
I agree. Yeah.
And I would say this, have you ever noticed as far as like we talked on the phone
Yeah.
already, and I spoke to you about how in the Black community, a lot of us have felt as though that we're, misrepresented and misunderstood.
Yeah.
A lot of Black dads. I wanted to ask you this question. Have you ever really noticed that? Have you ever noticed that within just in your being out and about, or you're dealing with dads?
What about in the Black community versus white community, or?
Yeah. Have you just ever noticed, have you ever seen any type of disparity just within your own experience?
Yeah, I definitely have. I think that there's definitely stereotypes and like misperceptions about it for sure. I think that it's interesting. I think in all cases, we talked about this too, like dads today are like applauded if they're present or just doing parenting responsibilities.
Exactly.
And I think that's ridiculous, regardless of your color, class, whatever it is. Like, I just think that's absurd. It shouldn't happen. But I mean, I think, it's funny. You mentioned like race, and I always think of like Homer Simpson, right? Which like,
Yeah.
we all grew up with,
Yeah.
like, it's funny, but
Yeah.
it's not funny, right? He's a buffoon. And it was
Yeah.
like, that just became the expectation of dads. And
Yeah.
it was like, well, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a problem to begin with. I do
Yeah.
think, from the Black dad perspective, yes, and there's, stories about this all the time of like, they're being absent for a reason, right? Like if a Black dad did he leave? Is he in jail? Like, but it's a whole absentee narrative,
Yeah.
which I think is a little archaic. I mean, not to say archaic, I know there still exist problems,
Yeah.
but to your point, like, it's not giving any credit to the generations of dads that are there now, right? Black or white. And
Definitely.
likewise, I think for not all white dads, but a lot of times for like the affluent white dads, or especially like businessy white dads, there's a perception of like they're absent also because they're working, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they're like jerks, but for a different reason. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah.
like, so they both have these narratives, which, I get. I'm just kind of like, oh, like to pigeonhole like that is just so wrong, and it's such a disservice to everybody involved.
Exactly. And that's why
Yeah.
I like to ask that question about dads, and I love when I get people on the show that have had those relationships with their dads.
Yeah.
That's something that I missed out on, but I just appreciate hearing stories of other people who had dads that were there. And it encourages me, to hear that, because it
Yeah.
gives me this sense of, yeah, we can, I can do this. I'm
Totally.
it's hard at times. It's just very difficult, to continue staying encouraged and to continue to do what you know you should do. You know, it's we're dads, you know, and it's parents in
Yes.
general. It's parenthood in
Yes.
general at times as
Parenting
well.
is hard
Yeah.
for sure. But you know where I do think, and I'm like treading lightly because I want to be sensitive to the fact that I'm a white woman talking about Black dads at the moment, right?
Yeah.
But I do think, um, and this is just my perspective, right? But from what I've seen, one of the differences that I would say is that Black dads that are showing up, like in our generations, right,
Mm-hmm.
are, this is a word I really love, but it's really important. They're amplifying that. They
Mm-hmm.
are, they're not just like doing it, they're doing it and showcasing it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so for example, you could just be a great dad, which is awesome, right? But
Yeah.
you're not satisfied with that. You're like, no, I'm actually going to do a podcast and talk about this
Yeah.
and elevate the conversation because it's a conversation that needs to be had, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is so critically important. But to me, that's a big difference that I think like that Black dads are getting a little bit more. Like they recognize, hey, we do have this perception and we need to combat that. So we're
Yeah.
going to be vocal about it and do something,
Exactly.
which I think is really, really important.
Oh yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Man, I ran across something on Reddit today. And I brought this up on my Facebook earlier.
Okay.
It just I ran across it earlier this morning, and it had me thinking. I wanted to ask you about this. So there was a guy that was obviously he was a dad, and he was talking about how he works, 60 plus hours a week,
Yeah. Yeah.
and his wife was a stay-at-home mom, and they have, I think, two young kids, and he was just, just kind of venting on Reddit, saying that
Yeah.
he was, just really going through it. He just felt like he's suffocating. And, once he gets off work, he comes home and he handles the chores and
Totally.
tries to do everything that he can to take that pressure off of his wife. And at times his wife feels like she's not enough. And it was just he's just explaining a lot of things that he has going on at home. And this one guy made a comment, and he said, humans weren't built to raise children in a nuclear style family.
Mhm.
We are a social species that historically raised children in a
No
large
village.
family or tribe
Yeah.
setting.
Yeah.
It isn't natural for two people to share all of those burdens.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's probably some truth into it. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have the data to back it up, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's the whole narrative of it takes a village, right? I think it
Mm-hmm.
does. And frankly, I think the pandemic proved some of that, right? Like if you didn't
Yeah.
live by family or friends, like it was a nightmare, right? Like
Yeah.
it was just hard being isolated like that. I think I think that this is an advantage that women probably have because of the last, I don't know, hundreds of years of taking care of the kids, is that we've learned that it does take a village. And so you make one, right? Like
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends at the kids' schools. And when I say friends, I use that word lightly because they're not all
Yeah.
friends, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's a village. Like it's people you can turn to when you need something or they need you. And it's, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's a community. And I think historically, dads have not been a part of that. So like breaking into that, and men in general, I think sometimes have challenge like forming friendships and relationships and talking about this stuff. And like, it's hard. It's just, you need your people, right? Family, friends, whatever you call it. Absolutely. The bigger that village is, the easier that it will be. So yeah, I can definitely see that for sure.
Definitely. Good points. Good points. Good points. I
Do
want
you
to go
live
here.
by family in Florida?
I do. And I would
Great.
say this, that's been one of the biggest things for me. Being that the city that we live in is Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
And
Is that
born
where you
and
grew up?
raised. Yeah, this is
Yeah,
where I
born and
grew
raised.
up,
Okay.
born and raised. And most of all of my family is right here.
It's great.
Opposed
Yeah.
to my wife is originally from Chicago.
Oh, me
And
too.
wow, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So she's originally from Chicago, and her mom was in the Navy, so they moved
So
around.
they moved
She's
all the
just
time.
been,
Yeah.
I think she's lived in California, Oregon,
Yeah.
Ohio, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. She's been all over the place. So she's never
Yeah.
really had that stability like that.
Hmm.
And the rest of her family is the same way. They all kind of move around. And so for her, when we got married 10 years ago, it was like wow, like there's this stability where,
Yeah.
when we need something, I have aunts and uncles and brothers and cousins and my
It's
mom,
different. Yeah, for sure.
and and everyone loves her and they take her on as
I
she's
love that.
family.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes she tells me, like, man, like this is, I've never really had this, like consistently always around family. We have family get-togethers and we just go to my brother's house. It's just always family.
Yeah.
And that's been a big thing for me, being able to rely on aunts and brothers. And, in the same way, our brothers and cousins can
Yeah.
rely on us. So yeah, that's a huge thing, a big advantage. I couldn't imagine not having family
Well,
around.
and you know what? It allows for deeper relationships, but a wider breadth of relationships too, because then you and your wife can have time together and you can have time with your friends and,
Yeah,
and like, and your own hobbies and interests. And that's not neglecting your kids, right?
yeah,
It's just like, oh, I'm working on this slice of the pie at the moment, right?
yeah.
So it does help. Yeah.
And sometimes I would say this also, sometimes it feels, I almost feel guilty sometimes. And I have friends that tell me, you never should feel like that. I almost feel guilty when I'm like, man, I need some time for myself.
Oh
I
God,
need
no,
some
no,
time,
we all need time for ourselves.
man.
Yes.
And that's something that we've been combating over the years, just
Yeah.
not feeling guilty. Like, sometimes we really do need that time to decompress, and
Yes.
not be around the kids all the time. So it's a
Well,
big
and
thing.
frankly, like I think it's good for the kids to know that you're not always top dog. Like you are
Yeah,
my first priority, but like I've got me too,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
just like when you're older, you got to have you too. You got to seek stuff for your own fulfillment. Also, it can't just be about other people, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you about this. In what ways would you say a dad influences his daughter's confidence, power, and influence?
Oh God, I mean, this could be the whole conversation.
Yeah.
um, it's so interesting because I get this question obviously a lot, and people are often surprised that I founded this company because I'm a woman and a mom, right? And both my male friends and my female friends are both sort of surprised, and they're like, "What are you talking about? The dad's influence, like on the daughter?" And my response is that like it's not that I don't think that we as mothers are not influential. Of course, I know who runs my family. Do you know what I mean? But it's that I think it's just something different. Like when the saying, do as I say, not as I do, right? So like, I can preach confidence till I'm blue in the face. And I can tell, I have two daughters and a son as well. And I can tell my daughters like, you're beautiful on the inside. The outside is great, but it's just gravy, right? Like all that matters is inside. You don't have to care about that, right? And also, I can spend 45 minutes in the morning getting ready, right? So what I'm saying is different than what I'm doing. And that's because I also grew up in this society that taught me that aesthetics matter, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, my husband, we joke, I'm like, he takes a 2-minute shower. I'm like, are you even clean? Like, right? But he's like, he's in and out. And I'm like, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
silly example, but it's like, he doesn't have things holding him back because society didn't teach him to hold those things back, whereas they taught
Mm.
me. I'll give you actually a perfect example. This is one of my favorites. So you'll appreciate this one too, I think. So my oldest daughter, she's 11 now, but this was maybe, I don't know, maybe like 2 years ago or something. So she plays basketball. Oh, it must have been more than 2 years ago because it's pre-COVID, but whatever. She plays basketball and she'd had like a great game. She was really good in the game. So she was like a rock star, right? So we come home and she is, floating on cloud nine. And she's like, I'm awesome. And this was great. And did you see this? And like, I owned the court and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, you were amazing. But like, take it down a level, girlfriend, right? Like you had
Yeah.
teammates, like it wasn't all you, right? And then my husband comes in the door, her dad, and he hadn't heard our conversation. So he walks in the door and he goes, you're awesome. You're amazing. You were the best. And he's like feeding it. And she lit up again. And I realized in an instant, I was telling her to keep herself small. I was saying, don't brag, right? Because that's what I had always been told, right? It's like, you're great, but don't be too great. You got to make yourself, you got to credit other people too. And he walked in and he was like, no, swagger on. You know what I mean? And it was in that moment where I was like, yeah, do what he says. You know what I mean? Like, you should look at that example because that's how I want you to be. Don't be like me, be like that right now.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that, I think that's a good illustration of like, of all of it, of confidence, of resilience, of influence. It's like, just go. Like, I think that men and women are taught differently from the beginning. Like, I don't think confidence is innate by any stretch of the imagination. I think this is our society and, you know, our atmospheres that are putting in our situations. And I think that if dads can teach their daughters to swagger, then I want that for my daughters. Yeah.
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 uh, what in what ways would you say that, how can dads combat the societal, all the society stuff, and you know, especially social media? How do
Oh
we
God.
combat that?
It's such a good question. And I don't have an easy answer because I mean, it's like I hate social media and yet I recognize it's here to stay.
Yeah.
And it can do good. I mean, I can see that too, right? But it is it's tough. It's really tough. I'll tell you, I saw something on social media. This was like a friend of mine, her daughter, she was older. I think she turned like 15 or 16 a couple of weeks ago. And her daughter has her own Instagram account. And didn't have any posts actually on Instagram. It was just a couple posts, but you know, she's a kid, she's a teenager. So she has literally 2,500 friends. I don't even know 2,500 people, but this child has 2,500 friends. And she posted something. And of the 350 comments, this is not a celebrity, mind you, this is like a 15-year-old girl. Of the 350 comments, I think every single one of them said, "You're so pretty, you're gorgeous, you're lovely," like whatever. And I was like, well, of course, then this girl is going to grow up thinking that that's all that matters, right? You just had 300 plus comments telling you you're pretty. So when it comes to a dad's influence, I think it sounds silly, but I think really showing her, like telling her and showing her that her value is in who she is and not what she looks like is critically important, because it's just not the message that we're getting, the girls are getting from outside. And I think that men who like to look at women also, right? Like you're allowed to look at women and say like, "Oh, you're pretty, you're hot," whatever. But also saying, "Oh my God, that girl is so smart. I love the way she was thinking about that," right? Or like, "Oh, that is such a creative girl over there," right? Like really applauding more than just the aesthetic, more than the female, the girl piece of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that how important that is because, like I say, having these daughters, especially with my oldest, she just
Yeah.
turned 9, and so for them, her and my son, they're both, my youngest is still in preschool,
Yeah.
but my son, he's in kindergarten, and I was just thinking the other day, I'm like, you know, he's in kindergarten, my daughter is in 3rd grade. I think he has more confidence.
Yeah.
He just walks with he walks with this. I don't know. Sometimes I don't even think he's even conscious of himself.
I agree.
You
Yeah.
know, but my daughter, she's more like, I can tell she's always thinking about
Mm-hmm.
herself, what she done. Just from some of the things she would even say to me sometimes, I'm like, I wasn't even
It's
thinking about that.
crazy, right?
You know, not even
Yeah.
thinking
And
about that.
it's a great question. Like, how do you get her over that hump? Like, how do you instill that swagger? Right. Because that's what
Mhm.
you want.
Yeah, and I think I know it's hard for her also because they go to a Christian school, a private school,
Mm-hmm.
so there is majority white,
Okay.
and so I think for her, looking at most of the girls friends that she has, they're different from her,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that they look, the hair, and all of these things.
Totally.
And I know that's a challenge that she has.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm always trying to instill that confidence in her to know that she's beautiful inside and out, you know.
Yeah.
And I believe that's one of her love languages. Honestly, I do believe that one of her probably her number one love language is to hear that affirmation. And so for me as a dad, it's kind of hard because that's one of those things that I have trouble with.
Yeah.
That's also one of my wife's love languages, the affirmations. And I'm like, oh, that's like a hard thing for me because it's hard for me because I didn't grow up like that. You know, I didn't
Yeah.
grow not having a dad. I didn't really see anyone love my
Say those
mom
things
like
like out
that.
loud.
You know, I just
Yeah.
did it. The whole romance thing, it just never was me. And then in our culture, you know, that's not really a thing. You know, I mean, unless you're telling them how, quote unquote, you know, how sexy they are. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like outside of that, we've never really known how to compliment a woman.
Hmm.
And when you do, it almost feels weird. Like, oh man, I just said that. That's not even me. You know, it almost hurts inside, but I know that it's something that is needed. You know, it's something that my wife has expressed to me in the
Yeah.
past, and I know that's something that my daughter needs. So I'm just constantly always trying to learn. You know, to like today, she got out of school, and we were in the car, and I was in the middle of trying to listen to something. And she was like, Daddy, guess what? And she was just talking, talking, talking. And I was halfway listening, honestly. And I caught myself like, I'm really not even listening to anything. She was just going on and on. And I just had to turn the radio down for a quick second and actually listen to what she said. And I was like, that's good, baby. You know, I'm proud of you. And she was just happy in that moment. And she just
to
went
be
on
to
about
be
her life.
someone's listening to her. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So,
I love that. I mean, first of all, it's interesting. I'm familiar with the love languages too, but I've never thought about it in the context of a child's love
yeah.
language from an adult. And you're absolutely right. Like, and it could change, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that she may change as she gets older, but like, I think it's so interesting and so perceptive of you to recognize that, like, right now, this is her love language and she needs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not in a romantic way. It's just she
Yeah.
needs me to hear her, and like to be paying attention and then to hear it played back to her that I
Mm-hmm.
was paying attention,
Yeah.
like I think that's really interesting. That's a very good point. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's one of those things that I talked about a few times on the podcast. You know, I think it hit me maybe a year and a half ago. You know, we were looking into the love languages, me and my wife, and I'm
Yeah.
like, man, you know what? Children have these too. You know, they want to be loved.
Yeah.
You know, they need to be loved. The love languages is all about loving the person
I
correctly.
love
You
that.
know, the way that they
Yes.
want to be loved, and children have a certain way that they want to be loved. My son, he isn't really the affirmation person. My son likes for you to spend time with him.
Yeah.
That's his thing. He likes quality time. He
Mm.
likes
Yeah.
he wants to play a video game with me. He likes for me to throw the football with him and ride bikes with him. That's his thing. You know, he's just totally different than my oldest
Yeah.
daughter. And then my youngest daughter, she is physical touch all day. She loves hugs and
Yeah.
kisses. And that's her thing.
Well, and if
So,
you think about it, those kind of go with the developmental stages too, right? So
yeah.
that makes sense. But I think it's great that you're paying attention. With Alley, we have this thing called Chit Chats. They're a fan favorite. And it can be anything from like a would you rather, would you rather, chocolate covered strawberries or chocolate covered pretzels type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or it can be um like a more open-ended question. And we're really conscious of doing it both ways from the dad and the daughter, because what we found is that the kids, especially these girls, also love to hear the dad's thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of dads forget that, because dads are kind of tell like, oh yeah, whatever. I talk to kids differently. I don't tell them about my life or my family growing up or whatnot. But the kids, especially as they get older, they are desperate for those kind of stories, right? They love to hear, and they then start to see their dad as a person, not just their dad,
Mm-hmm.
right? But like, oh, you felt scared one time, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's really beautiful for the dad to be able to open up and be emotional like that too with the girls. I think is really special. It's really both ways.
Definitely. It's funny that you say that because some years ago, this is maybe about 5 years ago. About 5 years ago. So we went through this whole thing where uh we were homeless. Like, yeah, this is 2017. So we were
Yeah.
homeless about 5 years ago. And my wife and my two youngest kids had to go to Chicago for a few
Oh,
months. She went there with some family, and
yeah,
just until we got everything back together.
yeah.
And I
And the
remember
oldest stayed with you,
she stayed with me,
right? Yeah.
and that was her first time seeing me cry at the airport when my wife and the kids were leaving. And man, it was like one of those things that I hate even thinking about it sometimes. But
I can't even imagine,
yeah,
but you realize like you showing her that vulnerability is truly one of the greatest gifts you could ever give her, right?
oh
Like
yeah,
that she knows that that is accessible for you, and you guys survived. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
It's also like you asked, how do you teach resilience? By
yeah.
showing it, right? Like by not pretending that all's good all the time. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you're actually, I mean, not scaring them obviously, but you know,
Yeah.
you're being honest with her and showing that you have emotions too. It's okay.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
it was funny that she asked this question while we were there, and she was like, "Daddy, I didn't know that parents cry."
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's in the middle of all that, and I'm like, "Yeah, we cry, baby. Daddy cries a lot. Daddy cries a lot, actually." But and she was just so just in that moment, just like, "Wow,
Yes.
I didn't even know Daddy could even cry."
I mean, it's literally mind blowing for them, right? And also, like, it's new to them, but it's also when you think about it, you're giving her permission to have feelings too, and to like love other people, like well, frankly, to expect that of other people too, which is what we want for them, right? We want them to be in these healthy relationships, platonic friendship, whatever you want, but where they can both exchange feelings and emotion, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So let's go here. Um, so I wanted to ask this also. So stats show that I saw this on your website
Yeah.
that 47% of 7th to ninth grade girls believe that boys are better at math.
Yeah.
And I was like, never really heard of that one. And I
Yeah.
wanted to ask if that was something that you've ever felt or experienced.
Well, I'm different because I literally studied math like that. I'm an
Yeah.
undergraduate major in math. So I'm different. But
Yeah.
but I do it's interesting. I think, alley oop, we focus on girls of all ages. So it's really, I would say we're like 6 to 18, but I think the sweet spot, and when I say the ages I'm most interested are really kind of like 9 to 18, because that's when
Mhm.
it starts to get really interesting. Like when they're younger, I mean, they're just adorable, and it's impossible not to love them because they're just great. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
When they get to 9, and if you're not seeing this yet, you will soon. Like they get a little sassy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like yeah,
definitely. I'm
yeah,
seeing.
right. And it's hard. This is really, I believe this is when it's not just biological. This is when society just starts throwing everything at them, right? And it's about who they are as people and their identity. And in America, I shouldn't say this about everywhere in the world, but certainly in America, we revere quantitative people, right? So we revere math and mathematicians and engineers and economists and finance people, right? And if you think about it, like all those fields are very black and white. And it goes back to that stupid saying of like left brain and right brain, which we know is false, right? But we still kind of cling to that. And so girls are rarely black and white. Girls are very gray. They're all sorts of emotions going on there. Right. And I think if you think that if you think a party is all black and white and you're gray, you're like, I don't really fit in here, right? So then you're gonna like, I'm gonna go this way. And so I think if they don't identify with what they think is there, then they don't see room for that. So then they go and explore other things. And it's such a disservice to girls and frankly to all of these fields, because math and science and engineering and coding, I mean, and tech, Jesus, it's everywhere. It's in everything we do now. And we should be using those disciplines to solve the hardest problems, where girls have a totally different perspective and can be so creative. And yeah, so I think it's a disservice, and I think it's something we really need to be aware of, to
Definitely.
to think about. I did see an article recently. I think this was it was a middle school. I think it was a middle school. I think it was a college, like maybe like UC Davis or San Diego somewhere, that was putting on some conference for middle school girls. And it was a STEM conference. Everybody's obsessed with STEM, right? So it was all about tech, but they were focusing it on wearables, like, creating watches and sort of like wearable art and tech, and trying to meet the girls where their interests lied at the time. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And they had a great quote. One of the directors of it had a great quote, and he said, we need to show kids, but girls specifically, that tech can be fun, right? Because once you find the fun in it, then you can solve all sorts of problems that you're interested in. And I really love that. That really resonated with me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
See? I did not know any of that.
Yeah.
And I
It's
wouldn't
cool.
wouldn't even think about that stuff.
Yeah. It's sad. You'll see as your daughter gets older, like be conscious of it, because it's important that she does not get afraid of it. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, if one of them ever, even my son, if any of them ever say, I don't like math, I'm not good at math. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, math is life. Like, can you
Yeah.
solve problems? You're a problem solver. You're a detective. Like, that's what math is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What about this? How, in your opinion, why do you think dads are more likely to correctly assess their children's
Uh,
confidence than moms?
yeah, it's you know what, I don't have an opinion on this, because that's what the research showed, and
Yeah.
frankly, I was also floored by that research comment,
Mhm.
or that study. But when I think about it, well, you tell me, like in your family, looking at your oldest specifically, right? Do you
Mhm.
think, how is your relationship with her different than your wife's relationship with her currently? And I recognize it could change, but currently.
Um, I would say that I spend a lot of time with them, um, talking with them, and I do like to try to understand them. Like
Yeah.
that's a big thing for me. Like I really, some, I don't want my kids to think that I don't understand them, even when I'm upset. And sometimes, I would get upset with them,
Yeah.
and then I have to go back and I have to go and talk with them and just tell them that I'm sorry and all of these things and just listen to them, especially my oldest, because she will tell you exactly what she feels.
Yeah.
I mean, she's good with understanding her feelings.
That's great.
And she's just telling me all of these things, and I'm trying to be understanding. And I take it to heart. Like, all right, I'm gonna make sure I try to understand this and work with her in this way, because I know how important that is for her to feel like she's heard
She's
and
understood.
feel like
Yeah.
she's understood and she's
Yeah.
loved. I think that's a huge thing for her. So I try to do that with all my kids all the time, just letting them know that I hear them, I love
Yeah.
them, and I think that's just it's a big thing for them.
So you related to your son. He's the boy, he's the middle kid. So you kind of go into it thinking you're prepared, right? Like in a
Mhm.
different way, not prepared, but have a little bit better understanding of what's coming around corners and whatnot. And I think you don't even have any expectation of that with the girls. You're like, foreign territory, no idea what's going on. I'm in for the ride, but I have no idea what to expect, right?
Yeah,
And I think maybe that's part of the difference, right?
yeah,
Because I go in with my daughters and I'm like, oh, listen to me. I know what you're going to face. I'm coming in with a chip on my shoulder. I'm trying to prepare them, right? I'm trying to do everything I can, but I can't judge them the same way or assess them the same way,
mm,
because I'm bringing my own baggage. You're not bringing any
yeah,
baggage. You're
yeah,
coming with totally fresh eyes, right? So
yeah,
like, if they're genuinely acting like an idiot, you're like, no,
yeah,
you're literally acting like an idiot right now,
yeah,
right? And also, like, if they're overreacting to something or being too sensitive, you also have a little bit clearer view of that too.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, so I think that's part of the difference.
yeah. And that's a big thing. Like I say, like with my son, when it's crazy because he has so many of my characteristics when I was a child. And my wife always tells me, he's acting just like you. You know, he's just, oh my God. And I'm like, and it just gives me this thing. I'm like, I can't be so upset, you know. And my mom would say the same
Yeah.
thing about my daughter. She's like my youngest one, she cries all the time. That's her thing. If she feels like you say the wrong thing to her, she will just, oh my God,
Waterworks.
the
Yep.
world is done. And my mom was like, yeah, you did it too. You were always everywhere we went. And I was with one of my uncles last week, and she started to cry. I think her and my daughter they were fussing about something. And so she just starts crying. And I'm like, come on, man, please don't start to crying, please. And my uncle says, no, let her keep doing it because you did it to me all the time. You always cried everywhere we went. You cried about French fries from McDonald's. You cried about the chicken.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right, man. So it just gives me that just understanding them, you know, at times I'm so serious,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm like, sometimes like they're kids, man. Just let them live a little bit.
Totally.
You know, you deal with them on their level.
Yes,
And
I think that's right.
that's
Did
something
you
that
have
I'm still
sisters?
learning.
Did you have sisters growing up or just
No
brothers?
sisters.
So that's
No. Well, I
interesting too.
have two sisters, but I never lived
You
with
didn't grow up with them. Okay.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting too. But I think so. So my husband, he grew up with two older sisters, right? So he
Mhm.
saw it. Like he had more expectations than a typical man, right?
Yeah.
And he's married to me. So like,
Yeah.
he has me in his ear all the time. But I'm
Yeah.
telling you that I did not see him get it
Mm.
about how our world is still different for boys than it is for girls. I did not see that click for him until we had our daughters, until they were a little bit older. And it was like a silly example, but I saw it. Like I actually saw the moment where he got it. And that to me was really profound. And in seeing it, I was like, oh, you get it now. So
Yeah.
now you need to be part of this, right? Now you see the world is different. So now you need to make it better and you need to be an active participant in this. And he is like, he sees like, oh, I do have influence here. Like I don't want her to grow up in that world. I want her to grow up in a better world. I'm like, yeah,
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah.
How have dads responded to your program?
Yeah,
Your
so it's
business?
such a good question. They've been so supportive. I mean, it's the truth is, Anthony, is that like we don't know what we're doing yet. Like we're building in public, we're building really transparently, right? We're just and like, what are we building? I mean, even at the beginning, you're like this organization, which it is, but it's a company. It's not a
Yeah.
non-for-profit, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing here? And the truth is, we don't know yet. We're figuring it out. We just know that this is a very special relationship that is not currently getting the attention it deserves and therefore is not producing the results that we think it's capable of. So from my perspective, I'm like, okay, here's what I want. I'll tell you this. When we send a newsletter or we have our Instagram posts, like our engagement is ridiculous. Like our numbers are so high that every week I'm like, this can't be right. Like something's wrong here, right?
Yeah.
And it's not. But the numbers are correct, but we're still not reaching enough. So that's on us. Like we need to work on the reach, certainly. But the people that are in the know are hyper engaged. And that's what for us, like we're seeing they want something, the dads and the moms. Like we have a community of moms too that are like, yeah, this relationship is really important. And I want my husband to like be a part of this and I want my daughter to be a part of that, right? And it's not, I shouldn't say that because it's not always, I'm very careful, it's not just dads in a conventional setting, right? It's coaches, it's teachers, it's
Yeah.
uncles, right? It's the dad figure is important. But my dream is, obviously I'm like a sports nut too, but like my dream is that the NBA playoffs has the two of the bottom front rows are blocked off for alley-oop dads and daughters, right? Because they should be there. And frankly, not just the NBA playoffs, but the WNBA playoffs, right? Like I want them all, like this is alley-oop. Like I want the stock exchange. Like I want the
Yeah.
trading floor, right? A whole bunch
Yeah.
of, what is it, like 90% dudes, right? I
Yeah.
want them to have a day that's alley oop and it's bring your daughters, right?
Yeah.
And like I want them as a part of that. Like that's what I want. So I don't know where this goes yet. I just want people to be a part of it. You know what I mean?
It's interesting you said that. This just brought back to mind something else I saw earlier on
Yeah.
social media. I'm just surfing And I saw this thing and I'm like, So it said that someone made a mention about daddy daughter, was it daddy daughter dances?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think it mentioned that, but I think the overall theme was dad days at schools. And they were like, I think we should get rid of dad days at schools and we should just make it family days because of
Yeah.
the kids that don't have dads.
It's
And
tricky. It is. It
so
is
there were
tricky.
a lot of people who were
Up in arms
like,
about
yeah,
that.
I hear
Yeah.
that. And then there were some people like, what are you guys talking about, man? Like,
Yeah.
that's not our fault. And I'm like, ugh,
Right.
that's one of those things. And they were like, if it's family day, then
I know.
dads are still included. And I'm like,
It's so tricky.
okay.
It's so tricky. And especially in today, in our very like woke culture,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you have to be like sensitive to everything.
yeah.
There's an amazing organization, not mine, another one. It's called Girls on the Run. I don't know if I'm sure you have
I've
somewhere
never
in
heard of
Florida.
that.
They're a nonprofit. They're national. I'm sure they have it somewhere in Florida. I don't know if it's in Gainesville, but it's great. They focus on, I think, third grade through fifth grade, teaching girls confidence through running. Like they really focus on running. And then, there's like kindness and, like mentoring pep talks as a part of it too. It's a great concept. But anyways, I was speaking with a director there, and she has a couple daughters, and she's a lesbian. So she and her wife, she was like, listen, I love what you're doing. But no, she only had one daughter. She's like, I love what you're doing. And I think she was in high school. She's like, but my daughter doesn't have a dad. And I said, that's fine. Like, who's her male adult figure in her life? And
Yeah.
I'm like, do you have any male friends? Do you have any brothers? Like, does she have any uncles or coaches? And she was like, no, she really doesn't. And I was like, she should. And I was like, honestly, because I don't think you want to send her out into this world at 18 and she's never had that relationship with an adult male. Like she needs that modeled in some way.
Yeah.
So, and same thing also, like, girls that are maybe if they're born biologically as a boy, but they identify as a girl, I'm like, great. I'm like, listen, I don't care what's under your pants. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like either way, I'm like, oh, we just care
Yeah.
about people that identify as daughters and people that identify as dads, in quotes,
Yeah.
in some way, right?
Yeah.
It is that connection that is so I mean, look at Gino Remy, right? Like the coach
Yeah.
of Connecticut. He has been a quote unquote dad to so many girls, right? And
Mhm.
has literally changed their lives, and it's
Mm.
just, it's a connection that is critically important and influential. It's very, very powerful, really powerful.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
then you hit my next question. I was gonna ask if you ever had people that say stuff like, "Oh, why are you only focusing on dads and daughters?
Yeah.
What about sons and moms?"
Oh, I get this
People
all the
always,
time.
yeah,
I get this from my friends all the time. And I'm like, listen, there's a lot out there for us. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
like there's a lot of media and a lot of products and a lot of companies that are really focused on the mom. Like, that's great. I love those companies, right? I'm like, we
yeah,
are just not that. We are
yeah,
really about that dad and daughter. And it is unique. I will tell you though, I do remember one of my kids when they were in preschool, I think, they changed they didn't have a mom's day. They didn't have a dad's day. I don't even think they had a grandparents' day. I think they had a VIP day. And I was like, oh, that's cute.
yeah,
Okay, that works. Yeah.
yeah,
Like, I was
yeah.
like, all right, that's good.
What resources would you recommend to dads?
Great question. So, well, I mean, obviously alley-oop. So we
Yeah.
are coming out. We're coming out with some type of I don't want to call it a kit. It's like a subscription box, but it can be accessed virtually. So you get something in the mail, but there's also, you can access it virtually, where there's a bunch of different challenges and activities that are designed for the dad and the daughter to do together. And it depends on the kid's age, obviously. So like a 9-year-old activity or challenge there is different than a 15-year-old challenge, right? But they're fun. Like we do them, they're really designed, frankly, like I'm a parent. Like if I'm bored, I'm not engaged. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, I kind of think the same thing has to be true for the dad. So I'm like, we need to do something that's not them bored to tears, right? And
Yeah.
it's fun. You can do like a lot of fun things. So we have a lot of really unique activities and challenges that are awesome. I also, there's a lot of content out there. Some's better than others. Yeah, I think it's hard to weed through. So find sources that you trust and let them do the curating, I would say, for you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to weed through all of it, right? Um, and I would say the last one is really just listen. Like it's exactly what you're doing, right? And I mean, I love this love language concept that you're applying towards kids. Like I think that's smart. Pay attention. Just listen. Like we don't, moms, we're not great at this sometimes. I find myself being really preachy with my kids at times, and I
Yeah.
have to like stop and be like, what do you think? And
Yeah.
kind of bite your tongue sometimes, but
Mm.
it's good. It's important, especially when they hit those rough ages where you just get like whiplash, like going through the different emotions, like, yeah.
I don't even want to think about what it's gonna be like. Oh,
But it's
right
good. I mean,
now.
it's such, it's the complexity of it. The other thing that I would say too is, as much as I care, everything is for the girls from my perspective, right? It's like all that I care about. But I think that I know statistically, like the effect that these girls have on their dads is incredible. And that data is there. It's been studied, right? Like if you look at, okay, there's been meta studies, like huge studies internationally, across country, across product, across industry, CEOs that are men, male CEOs that have a daughter have smaller gender wage gaps in their companies. So it's this ripple effect that having a daughter changes the lens through which you see not just your daughter, but the world, right? And it's pretty incredible, it's
Definitely,
really powerful.
definitely. Yes, definitely. I would
So be open to that. That's what I would say. That would be the thing I'd say. Just be open to that.
on that point, I would say I think that's well, I know that's something that's true because I don't know what it is about my daughters. Like my son, he does tug on my heart. He
Yeah,
does.
for sure.
And he tugs on my heart for that same reason what I told you earlier. With him being that middle child, it's
Yeah,
just something about that is always draws me to him and makes
totally.
me, I can't ignore him because I'm like, oh, I remember how that felt. Oh, I just
Yeah.
but it's something about the daughters, as much as I'm so upset with them sometimes, I can't sleep. I'm like, I gotta go back. I gotta go and just lay my head on her pillow.
I know.
And, you know, my oldest daughter, man, she just one
She
night,
crushes you,
yeah, she
right?
just, I don't even know. I'm like, oh, she gets me every time.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things,
Yeah.
to feel that embrace. And I don't know, I guess it's because of their, I don't know, this the feminine energy there. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's just that to feel the embrace of my daughters, to feel them hug me and tell me that they love me and to
Yeah.
kiss me and tell me how
It's
much they care
incredible.
about me. Yeah, it's different. It's
But you
different.
you asked earlier, like, what has the response of our community, of our audience been to this? And I will tell you that we have so many different dads, like right across all these different states, different class, different race, like across the board, different ages, right? It doesn't matter. Like, if you ever talk to them, like and granted, this is what we do at Elliot, but we're literally just about this relationship.
Yeah.
It's like they light up from within, right? And some are better at expressing and articulating, how they feel, and others can't. They don't have the words, but you can see it. Like when you talk to them, you can hear it in their voice. Like it's a different kind of love. Like it's just a joy that is so um not even it's like selfless. It's just so like I would do anything for her. She is the light of my life. It's a really beautiful thing.
Well, my last question here.
Yeah.
How tell the audience how they could join Alley.
Yes.
How can they find Alley? How can they find
Yes.
you? All of
Thank
that.
you. So yeah, so our website is Let's Alley-oop, ALLEYOOP, no dashes or anything, and just Let's Alley-oop. And Instagram as well, same thing, same handle at Let's Alley-oop. Like I said, we're kind of like just starting, we're growing this community. We are open to any and all suggestions. And I mean, that's the beauty of it too, right? Like dads are creative, they're professional, they're collaborative, and now it's for their daughters. Like there could be no more important reason to be doing this. And like, let's amplify, like I said, like you are, like, let's amplify this connection and let's figure this out together. Like, let's just join in and see where it goes. Yeah.
Good. Well, it was definitely a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much,
I'm
Anthony.
not
I
gonna
really appreciate it.
hold you too long. Well, I know you're on the West Coast.
Yeah, I'm good.
For me, it's 9:30 p.m. So what do you guys? 6:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you guys are, just getting off work.
Exactly.
So, so it's the end of the night for us on my side. But yeah, it was definitely good talking with you. I'm glad that you reached out to me, and hopefully, we could collab on something.
I would love it. I would love it. Thank you so much, Anthony. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah. So for all of my listeners out there, you guys heard it from her mouth. Let's Alley-oop on Instagram. Yep. Let's Alley-oop.com. Go check out the website. Go follow her on Instagram, and let's support. Let's continue to grow this community of dads, and let's continue to love on these children, love on each other. Let's continue to do what we do. So, Ms. Jaime,
keep doing what you're doing too. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Well, I will let you go. And thank you. All of my followers, please, like I said in the beginning, go and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Go find us at www.dadcanwetalk.com. You can listen to all of the episodes right there, everything you need. I just set up a donation tab on the website. So if you want to support the podcast, you can just go on, hit donate, and it'll take you to PayPal. You can put in your information. You can support monthly. You can support at just a one-time donation. Whatever it is that you can give, it's always needed. Running the podcast is not lucrative when you're not a celebrity. So yet. Yeah. So when you're someone like me, everything helps, especially with the community events that we're trying to do. And again, if you want a shirt, a Dad Can We Talk shirt, we will be ordering some more of the original colors. I haven't had these in a while. I'll have some more original color shirts, and I have some that will be black shirts with green and white. So it's kind of like the Nigerian flag. So if you want them, if you need it, please contact me on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm Dad Can We Talk everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I'm on TikTok also. Yeah, you can find me on TikTok. So I'm not that good at TikTok, but I'm trying to learn it. So yeah, Ms. Jaime, I thank you for spending this time with me, and
thank you.
I hope you have a good rest of your night.
Thank you too. Bye, Anthony.
All right, see you later.